For 3 decades, Johnny Carson welcomed Hollywood royalty onto The Tonight Show. Viewers saw laughter, glamour, and unforgettable interviews. But behind the curtain, Carson kept a mental blacklist, names he believed weren't just difficult, but downright evil. Icons worshipped by millions who, off-camera, revealed monstrous sides hidden by fame. Which star reduced his staff to tears? Which legend Carson nearly banned forever? Tonight, we uncover the 10 celebrities Carson secretly despised, and the shocking reasons why. Joan Crawford. When Joan Crawford appeared on Carson's couch in 1970, audiences saw the perfect embodiment of old Hollywood glamour, poised, polished, and seemingly gracious. But Carson and his staff saw something entirely different, a chilling display of cruelty that haunted the studio long after the cameras shut off. Her demands started days before her arrival. Crawford sent a 4-page memo dictating every detail: the angle of her chair, the height of Johnny's desk, and the studio temperature locked at exactly 67 degrees. Even the lighting setup had to mimic her favorite cinematographers. Staff joked it was like preparing for a royal visit, only less pleasant. But her true nature revealed itself when a young production assistant entered her dressing room with a tray of water she herself had requested. Crawford flew into a vicious tirade, unleashing insults so severe that security intervened. Witnesses, said the assistant, barely 20, left in tears after being called a brainless little whore who belonged in a brothel, not a studio. Crawford demanded her firing on the spot. Carson's producer refused, and the tension bled into the taping. On camera, Crawford was flawless, every smile rehearsed, every laugh mechanical. Between commercial breaks, she sat in stony silence, waiting like a machine to reactivate. Afterward, Carson muttered to Ed McMahon, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." Years later, when Mommy Dearest exposed her alleged abuse of children, Carson told friends he believed every word. He'd already seen the mask slip, and once you did, you never forgot it. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra's appearances guaranteed ratings. He'd croon a song, swap jokes with Johnny, and charm the nation. But behind that velvet voice, Carson saw behavior that chilled him. Sinatra arrived with entourages that looked more like mob muscle than showbiz pals. Crew members described feeling under surveillance as they spread across the studio. The worst came when a floor manager gave Sinatra the standard 3-minute warning before his segment. Sinatra grabbed the man by the tie, pulling him close, growling, "Nobody tells me when I go on when I'm ready." The floor manager, a Korean War veteran, was left shaken. Watching from his office, Carson nearly canceled the appearance. Sinatra's unpredictability created constant headaches. He'd cancel at the last minute, once while already in the building. He wasn't in the mood. Carson tolerated divas, but unreliability mixed with intimidation was another matter. The breaking point came during a commercial break, when Sinatra made a crude comment about a female staff member's looks. Carson, usually detached, cut him down instantly. "We don't talk about my staff that way here." Sinatra looked stunned. When the cameras came back, Johnny's questions were clipped, his warmth gone. Afterward, Carson told his producer, "I don't care about his ratings. Once a year, max." That decision was extraordinary for Johnny, who rarely meddled in bookings. For him to sideline, Sinatra spoke volumes. Publicly, the two remained cordial. Privately, Carson compared him to a mob enforcer. If he didn't sing, he'd be breaking kneecaps. Sometimes, I think he was both. Orson Welles. Orson Welles brought with him a booming voice and the aura of genius. For viewers, his appearances were captivating. Tales of filmmaking, booming laughter, and grand pronouncements. But Carson dreaded them. Welles treated The Tonight Show not as Johnny's platform, but his own kingdom. Before tapings, Welles routinely dismissed the writers' carefully prepared questions, crossing them out in disgust and returning a blank page. One writer recalled him sneering, "Pedestrian, obvious, beneath me." This left Carson forced to improvise, a risky game given Welles's tendency to monologue for minutes on end, ignoring cues. On one occasion, scheduled for 7 minutes, he rambled for nearly 25. Carson gave every subtle signal to rap: a tap on his pencil, a glance to the floor manager. But Welles bulldozed ahead, bumping 2 guests entirely. Crew muttered that the genius had hijacked the show. His treatment of staff grated even more. He refused to address assistants directly, instead commanding, "Tell the girl I need more water. Have the boy adjust the light." To Carson, who valued his team fiercely, this contempt was unforgivable. The worst came when Welles tried to direct the cameramen mid-interview, ordering them to change angles. Johnny, a perfectionist about production, was livid. Afterward, he confided to Ed McMahon, "Genius doesn't excuse everything. He thinks he's Caesar. But this isn't Rome." Though Carson publicly praised Welles's contributions to cinema, privately, he saw him as a cautionary tale. Talent devoured by ego. Behind his regal bearing, Johnny saw not brilliance, but arrogance gone to rot. Bette Davis. Bette Davis's appearances were gold for audiences. With her smoky voice and sharp wit, she seemed like the perfect guest, feisty, legendary, and full of stories. But for Carson, every Davis booking meant bracing for battle. She had a habit of turning interviews into interrogations. If another guest drew laughs, Davis would seethe, interrupt, and even turn her back on them to dominate the spotlight. Producers recalled her glaring daggers at younger women, as if daring them to speak. Backstage, her venom flowed freely. Whiskey was a staple in her dressing room, and with it came barbs. She once sneered at a makeup artist, "I need someone whose hands don't shake like they're coming off a drunk." Even in the 1,970 seconds, when industry language was harsher, staff were stunned at her racist and sexist remarks. During one rehearsal, she tore into a cue card holder for being too slow. Carson, usually conflict-averse, stepped in. Calmly but firmly, he told her, "On this show, Miss Davis, we speak with respect, or not at all." Witnesses, said Davis, looked stunned, perhaps unaccustomed to being challenged, but she backed down. Carson admired her craft, but loathed her cruelty. After her final appearance in the early 80 seconds, he told his producer, "That's it. Life's too short to be verbally flogged, no matter how many Oscars she has." To the audience, she was an icon. To Carson, she was a courtroom bully who mistook cruelty for charm, and Johnny wanted no part of it. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney embodied Hollywood history. Once the #1 box office star, his presence should have been nostalgic joy. Instead, Carson's staff dreaded his visits. Rooney arrived with chaotic energy, often slurring from drink, his jokes rambling and his behavior crossing lines Johnny couldn't ignore. Female assistants begged to be reassigned when Rooney was booked. He developed a reputation for grabbing wrists, holding hands too long, and making lewd suggestions under the guise of harmless banter. One assistant recalled bringing him water, only to have him refuse to release her hand, asking pointedly if she was married. On air, Rooney's unpredictability became a liability. In 1977, he began a story about Judy Garland that veered into inappropriate territory, forcing Carson to cut him off and redirect. During breaks, Johnny asked producers, "Is he drunk, or is this just who he is now?" Carson, who maintained strict boundaries between humor and harassment, found Rooney's confusion over professional conduct troubling. The generational excuse, "That's how things were in his day," didn't fly with Johnny. After Rooney ogled and commented repeatedly on a young actress sharing the stage one night, Carson privately apologized to her after taping, "An extraordinary step." He told her bluntly, "That's not how professionals act on my show, and it won't happen again." From then on, Rooney's bookings dwindled, often relegated to pre-taped daytime slots. Johnny had seen enough. For him, nostalgia was no shield against predation. Zsa Zsa Gabor. Zsa Zsa Gabor embodied excess. With her glittering gowns, dramatic accent, and endless marriages, she was made for late-night television. But to Carson's crew, she was a walking headache. Her rider bordered on parody. Orchids only, no carnations. Perrier with precisely 3 ice cubes. A dressing room set at 74 degrees. A personal lighting technician, flown in at the show's expense. And no female guest under 40 allowed on the same episode. "We thought it was a joke at first," one producer recalled. But she was dead serious. If her demands weren't met, she simply refused to leave her dressing room, delaying tapings and throwing the schedule into chaos. The most infamous standoff came when she discovered the makeup team didn't stock her preferred foundation. She screamed until Johnny himself phoned her dressing room, coaxing her out with flattery. On stage, she sparkled, teasing Johnny, tossing off outrageous quips. But backstage, her tantrums drained the staff. Other guests cooled their heels as crew scrambled to satisfy her whims. Carson joked bitterly after one appearance, "I'd rather interview a cat. At least the cat wouldn't need 3 assistants and special lighting." Yet, she kept coming back. Why? Because when the red light blinked, she delivered. To Johnny, it was proof of Hollywood's cruel bargain. Sometimes, talent excused torment, but only barely. Shelley Winters. Shelley Winters wasn't malicious, so much as uncontrollable. A 2-time Oscar winner, she came armed with stories, opinions, and a fiery temper that could derail an entire show. Carson described her bluntly, "She doesn't talk, she detonates." Instead of amusing anecdotes, Winters launched into political rants or confessions that left Carson visibly scrambling. Once, a casual film question spiraled into a 5-minute monologue on government corruption. Johnny, usually a master of transitions, sat frozen, waiting for the merciful cut to commercial. Her volatility wasn't just verbal. On a British talk show, she threw a whiskey glass in Oliver Reed's face. The Tonight Show staff, aware of her reputation, quietly removed throwable objects from the set before her appearances. Still, Carson respected her passion. Unlike others, Winters wasn't cruel for sport. She cared deeply about issues and saw every microphone as a pulpit. But her unpredictability was exhausting. After one fiery segment criticizing the Vietnam War, Carson told producers, "I may not want to vacation with her, but at least she means every word." Winters wasn't evil in the same way as others on Carson's list, but her sheer unpredictability made her a powder keg. For Johnny, who valued control, that was almost as bad. Jane Russell. Jane Russell, famed for The Outlaw and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, inclusivity among his staff and friends. Hearing her remarks cut deeply. The final straw came. Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was adored by millions. A pioneering comic, a box office juggernaut, and the face of annual telethons raising millions for muscular dystrophy research. But to Carson, Lewis represented the ugliest side of celebrity ego. On air, he hijacked conversations, talking over guests, and even Johnny himself. In one infamous moment, he reached across and adjusted Carson's tie, a violation of Johnny's personal rule. No one touched him without consent. It wasn't playful, it was dominance. Backstage, Lewis was worse. He belittled crew, refusing to learn names, calling them camera guy or makeup girl. Once, when a cameraman coughed quietly during rehearsal, Lewis exploded, screaming that the man should be fired for breathing like an amateur. The cameraman had allergies. The staff never forgot. Carson loathed hypocrisy. Watching Lewis cry on telethons about loving children while treating workers as trash sickened him. He later told a colleague, "He's what happens when ego outruns talent." After one disastrous appearance, Carson told his producer, "Never again." Lewis effectively joined the blacklist. Years later, Carson shocked friends by summing him up with unusual venom. In a town full of phonies, he stands out as truly hateful, and that takes some doing. Joan Collins. Joan Collins brought Dynasty-era glamour to Carson's couch, dazzling gowns, cutting wit, and endless tabloid intrigue. But her appearances left scars on the staff. She arrived late, trailed by assistants carrying racks of wardrobe changes. Once inside, she treated crew with disdain. Wardrobe staff recalled her whispering, "Peasants," under her breath as they adjusted her gowns. During makeup, she openly mocked a stylist's outfit, reducing her to tears. The most infamous incident came when Collins refused to sit beside a fellow actress, sneering, "I don't share a couch with supporting talent." Carson was forced to rearrange seating to avoid a confrontation. On air, she sparkled, bantering, teasing, and commanding attention. But when the red light dimmed, the mask dropped. Johnny endured the performance for viewers' sake, but afterward, he told his producer, "If she thinks she's starring in Dynasty here, she's wrong. Never again." Collins's charm fooled millions. But to Carson, her poisonous tongue exposed what she really was, a diva who confused cruelty for confidence. Johnny Carson's blacklist wasn't about petty dislikes. It was about cruelty, ego, and abuse, hidden behind Hollywood's golden glow. He saw through the glamour, judging stars not by their fame but by how they treated the powerless. These 10 names, once adored, remind us of Hollywood's darkest truth. Fame doesn't equal goodness. Which revelation shocked you most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unfiltered Hollywood secrets.